Nobody warned us it would feel like that. That's the thing nobody talks about when they describe royal visits, the way the air changes before she even arrives. Like the atmosphere itself straightens up. Like the clouds pull back a little, not dramatically. Not the way they do in films, but just, to be fair, enough. Just enough that the light falls different on the grass, on the scarves, on the faces of people who drove 40 minutes from Pontefract with their kids bundled in layers just to stand in the cold and maybe catch 2 seconds of something real. I was one of those people. I'd been standing outside Bellevue, Wakefield Trinity's ground, since 9:30. Press badge clipped to my jacket, notepad already damp at the corners from the morning mist that sits over West Yorkshire like it's paying rent. I'm the club's groundskeeper, a man named Terry with a northern accent so thick you could spread it on toast, had been out since 7, remarking the white lines on the pitch with the kind of focus usually reserved for surgery. "She's coming to be fair, our ground," he'd said to nobody in particular, crouching down over a faded corner flag. He said it like he still didn't believe it. None of us, did, quite. Wakefield isn't a city that expects royal attention. That's not a slight. It's geography, it's history, it's the particular dignity of a place that has always done the work without waiting for applause. The cathedral's been standing since the 12th century. The Chantry Bridge is one of the oldest inhabited bridges in England. And Wakefield Trinity, the rugby league club, has been part of the bone structure of this community since 1873. 150 years of cold Saturdays, of men who worked the mines and mills Monday through Friday and gave everything they had left on a Sunday afternoon. That history lives in the stands. You honestly feel it when you walk in. The smell of liniment and old wood, the specific acoustics of a ground that has absorbed a century of crowd noise until the bricks themselves seem to hum with it. The faded well, photographs in the corridor, men in black and gold jerseys squinting at a sun that set decades ago. The club had been chosen, selected really, as part of Kate's ongoing initiative around community sport and mental health. The Princess of Wales had been doing quiet, deliberate work in this space for years. Not the splashy headline visits. The look, ones that take 3 months to organize and don't end up on the front page because that was never the point. A local charity worker named Donna, who'd been invited as part of the day, told me about it while we waited. "She doesn't come, basically, to be seen," Donna said, pulling her coat tighter. "She comes to pretty much see." Donna had worked with young men in Wakefield for 11 years, boys who fell through the gaps, boys for whom, basically, rugby league had been the thing that kept the gap from becoming a chasm. She'd submitted a case to the Princess's Foundation the year before, describing a program she ran out of the club's community wing, mental health sessions disguised as fitness sessions because sometimes you've to hide the medicine in the food. And she'd been invited today as a guest. Look, plus, she hadn't slept. The convoy arrived at 10:47, not with sirens, not with the kind of motorcade you expect from American political visits. That rolling thunder of black vehicles and uniforms. This was quieter, and 3 cars. A small security presence, professional and unobtrusive in the way that well-trained people are unobtrusive. You register them peripherally, and then your eyes move on. And then she stepped out. I've seen photographs, obviously. Everyone has. Plus, the photographs are competent. They capture light and composition and the general shape of a person. What they can't, for what it's worth, capture. And I say this as someone who spent years being skeptical of exactly this kind of statement, is the quality of attention she brings into a room, or in this case, a car park. She was wearing a coat the color of a winter sky just before it commits to rain. Not glamorous, practical. Her hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless and wasn't, and she was scanning, not the crowd, not in the performative way, not doing the royal wave and the quarter-turn smile. She was looking for specific things. In my opinion, specific people. The first person she found was Terry. He was standing to the side, holding the corner flag he'd been adjusting all morning because he hadn't put it down when the cars arrived, and now he was holding it like a medieval knight holding a lance, except he was 63 years old and wearing a high-vis vest and clearly wondering if he was supposed to be somewhere else. She walked straight to him. "You've kept the pitch beautiful," she said, and I was close enough to hear it. "It looks like someone cares about it." Terry's face did something complicated. He opened his mouth. TBH, he closed it. He looked down at the corner flag in his hand like it had betrayed him by being there. "Aye," he said finally. "Well, it's our ground, isn't it?" She smiled at that. Not a royal smile, not the curated, practiced one. Something smaller, something that came from a different place. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly it." Inside, the club had laid on a visit that threaded through 3 different parts of the building. The community program wing, the changing rooms, and the pitch itself, where a group of young players, ranging from about 14 to 17, had been warming up for the last hour under the supervision of coaches who were doing their best not to look like they were about to be visited by royalty and failing. The community wing was where Donna's program lived. It was an unflashy space. Plus, fold-out tables pushed against walls painted in Trinity's black and gold. A notice board covered in the kind of handwritten notes that accumulate in rooms where real work happens. Session times, phone numbers, a list of names in someone's boxy handwriting, a half-finished poster about an upcoming fundraiser. The carpet had seen better decades. Kate walked in and stood still for a moment, not performing contemplation. Well, actually looking. She moved to the notice board, read it, not scanned it, read it. I watched her eyes move left to right along the lines of text, the way you read something you're genuinely trying to understand. Then she, in my opinion, turned and found Donna. What happened in the next 20 minutes is the part I'm not sure I can render accurately because some of it's beyond the scope of what a notepad catches. Donna had prepared for this meeting the way people prepare for job interviews. She hadn't. Plus, she had sort of a summary of the program's outcomes over 3 years, the numbers, the attendance figures, the testimonials she'd been given permission to share. She had a folder. The folder stayed under her arm the entire time. Because Kate didn't basically ask for the folder, which she asked Donna how she'd come to this work. And Donna, who hadn't planned to talk about her brother, who hadn't mentioned her brother. In the application, not in the notes, not in the briefing documents, talked about her brother, about losing him at 22, about the way grief makes you either turn away from a thing or walk directly into it, about choosing, very for what it's worth, deliberately, to walk in. Plus, Kate listened the way a river listens to rain. She didn't speak over it. She didn't reach for the appropriate response too quickly. She sat with it, the way you sit with something true. And then she said, very quietly, "He would know what you've built here." Donna lost it. Not dramatically. Donna is not a dramatic person. Just the quick blink, the brief press of her fingers to her mouth, the breath that shook on the way in. "Sorry," sort of, she said. "And then please don't apologize," Kate said. That was it. That was the whole exchange. Except it sort of wasn't, because in those 20 seconds, everything that the visit was for became visible. The reason this ground had been chosen. The reason Donna actually had been invited. The reason it mattered that a woman with her platform had driven to West Yorkshire on a Wednesday in November. Not for the photographs, for exactly that. I stepped outside after the community wing section to write up my notes while things were fresh. The pitch was being prepared for the main session, the players starting their drills, coaches calling instructions across the cold air, the particular rhythm of a rugby training ground waking up. A man stood next to me at the railing. He, was watching his son. 14, he said when he noticed me noticing. Just joined the academy program this summer. He paused. Struggled last year, school and, the The usual. Plus, nothing specific. Everything specific. I asked if the club had helped. He looked at me like the question was almost too simple to answer. It gave him somewhere to be, he said. You underestimate that until you need it. Somewhere to be where people expect something of you and they're glad you showed up. That's not nothing. On the pitch, his son was running a line drill, arms pumping, breath coming out in small white clouds. Focused. Honestly, present. The particular aliveness of a young person doing a thing they're good at in front of people who see it. The man watched him the way you watch something you almost lost. I don't care who visits, he said. I just care that the place stays open. End of part 1. The changing room smelled exactly how you'd expect. Liniment, plus cold concrete. The faint ghost of 100 match days soaked into the walls and never quite aired out. It is not a smell you can describe as pleasant. It is a smell that does something else. Instead, it situates you physically in a tradition. You inhale it and you understand without being told that this room has mattered. That men have sat in here before games that mattered, and after games they lost, and during half-times when everything was slipping and the coach had to find the right words with maybe 90 seconds, and a squad looking at him with a particular expression that's equal parts exhaustion and demand. Kate walked in without hesitation. She touched the wooden benches, lightly, not for effect, just the kind of tactile engagement that speaks to genuine curiosity. She looked, up at the hooks where the jerseys hang on match days, at the whiteboard where someone had written a training session plan in green marker. She read it. The head coach, a broad-shouldered man called Marcus, who had the practiced stillness of someone who has managed large groups of very physical young men for a very long time, was explaining the program's structure. The pathways from junior rugby into mental health support. The way the club had, over the last several years, deliberately built a culture where asking for help was part of the ethos, rather than a violation of it. Rugby league communities, he said, have a particular relationship with stoicism, with toughening up. Plus, that's not all bad. There's something real in it. And about discipline and commitment. But it, can become a cage. We're trying to make the cage optional. Kate had her pen out. She was writing. Not note-taking in the administrative sense. Writing in the way of someone who hears something they want to keep. She asked Marcus to repeat the phrase, make the cage optional, and she wrote it down. Marcus, who had been matter-of-fact about the whole morning in the way of someone who had decided not to be overwhelmed by it, went slightly quiet at that. He looked at what she'd written. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. There were 6 young players selected to speak with Kate during this portion of the visit. 4 boys, 2 kind of girls. The girls were part of a women's and girls program that had grown enormously in the last 3 years, the part of a broader national movement that had seen Women's Rugby League begin, finally, to receive the attention and resourcing it had deserved for decades. The youngest was 15, and her name was Priya. She was small, and dark-eyed, and had the particular compressed energy of an athlete. That quality of stillness that's actually coiled motion, constantly choosing not to move. She'd been playing for 2 years. She'd come in through a school partnership program, brought by a PE teacher who had enticed something, and done the unglamorous administrative work of following up on it. Kate sat across from her at the fold-out table someone had brought in from the community wing. "What made you stay?" Kate asked. Priya thought about it. Plus, genuinely considered the question rather than reaching for the prepared answer. "It's the first time I got tackled properly," she said. "Like a real tackle, not a training one. I thought I'd be scared, but I wasn't." She paused. That I wasn't scared. I wanted to figure out what else I wasn't scared of." Kate wrote that down too. One of the TBH boys, older, 17, already built like someone who might go further with this, talked about his father, about for what it's worth, playing to show him something, about his father not being able to attend matches. He didn't elaborate on why his father couldn't attend. He didn't need to. Kate didn't ask. Plus, she said, "He knows." The boy looked at her. "Parents always know," she said, "and even when they can't see it." He nodded. A short nod. The kind that means the conversation is over because something has been settled. Outside, I think, on the pitch, the session was already underway. The training had been structured, organized by the coaching staff with some awareness of the visit, but it didn't feel staged. When sport is real, it doesn't perform. The players were too focused on what they were doing to perform anything for an audience. They were running, hitting tackle bags, calling to each other, making the micro-adjustments that separate athletes who are training from athletes who are just showing up. Kate came out onto the pitch. She put on boots. This was not apparently planned, or rather, pretty much, it may have been, at some level, discussed. But the way it happened didn't look planned. It looked like someone who had been watching other people run for an hour and had reached the natural end of her capacity to watch without participating. She took off her coat. She said something to Marcus. He handed her a pair of boots from somewhere, and she sat on the bench at the sideline and put them on herself, with the efficiency of someone familiar with the process, which She played hockey. She's been photographed doing any number of physical activities over the years. She's not a stranger to boots and cold grass and the undignified process of getting changed outside. The players stared. Then one of the coaches, a young woman named Asha, barely older than some of the players, called out, "Right then, we've got basically an extra player. Let's use her." Laughter. The tension that had been sitting over the pitch since the cars arrived. That specific ambient tension of people trying to act normal in an abnormal situation broke like the weather breaking. Kate jogged onto the pitch. And the thing is, this is the thing that I keep returning to when I write about it, she jogged onto that pitch like someone who belongs on pitches, not performing athleticism, not doing the thing where you sort of trot and wave and it's clearly symbolic. Like she ran. Proper running, which her arms working, her head up, finding her position. The drill they put her into was a passing sequence. Ball pretty much, moving down a line, players shifting, the rhythm of it. Catch, pass, step, catch, pass, step, which looks simple and isn't, because you've to read the player beside you and trust the player ahead of you and adjust your pace to the collective rhythm, rather than your own. She dropped the first pass. The ball bounced, in my opinion, and off her hands and rolled across the wet grass, and there was a microsecond of, the held breath of a crowd watching something go wrong. Except that this wasn't a crowd, it was a training pitch, and the thing that happened next was that Priya, the 15-year-old with the compressed energy, laughed. Not a mean laugh. The laugh of an athlete watching another athlete fumble something and recognizing the experience. "Again?" called Asha from the sideline. Kate picked up pretty much the ball. The second pass was clean. The moment that stopped me, the one I've been trying, to figure out how to write, since it happened, came about 20 minutes into the pitch session. There was a brief break. Players grabbing water bottles, coaches conferring. The kind of quiet interval that exists in training sessions the way rests exist in music, structurally necessary, functionally restorative. Kate was standing near the halfway line. One of the older boys, the one who'd talked about his father, was standing a few meters away, looking at the empty far end of the ground. The stands at Bellevue are modest, covered on one side, open on the other. On a cold Wednesday morning with no match on, with the town going about its November business outside. The gates, the ground has a specific quality of emptiness that's sad exactly, more like held breath, like it's waiting. The boy said something. I couldn't honestly hear it from where I was. I saw his mouth move. I saw him gesture toward the empty stand with a slight lift of his chin. That directional gesture young men use when they're indicating something they don't want to point at directly. Kate looked where he was gesturing. She nodded. She said something back. He turned and looked at her. A longer look than he'd given anyone all morning. The kind of look that's measuring something. Plus, then he nodded once. And walked back to the drill. I'll never know what was said. I've thought about asking him. I was introduced briefly afterward, got his first name, Ryan, got the club's contact information in case there was a follow-up piece. But I won't ask. Some things close over themselves like water, and asking would be ripping the surface back open to find nothing useful underneath. What I can say is what I saw. A young man who had been carrying something all morning put some of it down on a rugby pitch in Wakefield on a Wednesday in November. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually. They did one final drill as a full group, the whole squad, all 18 players who'd been training, plus Kate, plus Asha and 2 other coaches. A contact drill, the kind with tackle shields rather than actual tackles, but still physical, still requiring commitment, still asking everyone in the line to absorb impact and come back from it. Kate took her place in the line. She took the impact from the shield like she'd been doing it for years, not flinching, not bracing in the way of someone who expects it to hurt, just absorbing it, resetting, plus ready for the next one. The squad was watching, even the ones not in the line, or watching the way they watch when something surprises them. Not because a Royal was taking tackle shield hits on their pitch, because she wasn't making a thing of it. She wasn't performing resilience for them, she was just being resilient. And there's a difference, and there's an enormous difference. Young people who have been around performance all their lives, who can identify a performance of toughness from a real one the way a musician hears a bum note in a recording, those young people know the difference. They knew. Plus, after the drill, Ryan turned to the player beside him and said something. The other player laughed, not the held, polite laugh of someone in an official situation. The real one. The brief, genuine, I slightly surprised at itself laugh that means something actually landed. I'd give a great deal to know what Ryan said. The lunch was held in the main function room, the kind of room that has done duty as a wedding venue and a birthday party hall and a post-match corporate hospitality suite and a charity fundraiser at least once a year going back further than anyone currently employed by the club can remember. There were round tables, plates of food that had been organized with genuine care and slightly too much ambition, little Yorkshire puddings that were excellent, a salad arrangement that was trying very hard, miniature beef sandwiches that disappeared within 5 minutes of being put down. 32 people, the players, plus the coaching staff, Donna and 3 colleagues from the community program. Oh, a handful of representatives from local charities the club had worked with. The deputy mayor, who was wearing a chain of office and had the specific energy of someone who had been told to arrive at 9 for something starting at 10 and had arrived at 8:45. Pretty much, and Kate, no longer in boots, back to the winter sky coat, hair still pulled back, seated at a table that had been placed slightly toward the center, rather than at a top table arrangement, because someone, I suspect Kate herself or someone who knows her well, had requested it that way. She ate the Yorkshire puddings. She ate several of them. I mention this because it matters. There's a category of official visit where the guest of honor moves food around on their plate with the practiced non-eating of someone who has been told not to eat before events and doesn't want to seem like they're indulging, and this was absolutely not that. She ate the Yorkshire puddings and she talked to the people beside her, not at them, to them. The conversation shifted, during lunch, from the individual to something broader. It was Kate who shifted it. She'd been listening. She's a quality of listening that I've now watched for several hours across this one morning, and I'd describe it as active in the specific sense. That she's making connections while she listens, filing things, by setting one thing against another thing to see what they reveal in combination. And she said, "What I keep hearing from everyone here is the same thing. That the reason this works is because it doesn't announce itself as support. It's a rugby club. People come for rugby, and then the other thing is already there." She looked around the table. "That's, not accidental, is it?" Marcus said. "It took about 4 years to build that culture deliberately enough that it became unconscious." Kate nodded. "And now the players carry it to each other." "That's the goal," Donna said. "When it's in the walls. When it doesn't need a poster." Kate looked at the wall. There was a poster on the wall, a mental health awareness poster with a helpline number in large text. "You'll keep the poster?" she said, dry as anything. Donna laughed. Plus, obviously, there was a gift. The club had arranged a framed jersey, a Wakefield Trinity jersey with the number 1 position, black and gold, the club's 150th anniversary crest on the chest, presented by the club's longest-serving player, a man who had been with the club for 16 years, and who stood up to speak with the practiced stillness of someone who had rehearsed this and then decided, standing here, to set the rehearsal aside. He said, "We don't get a lot of people coming to see what we do. Usually we go to them. This actually time? She came to us." He paused. "That means something." He handed over the jersey. Kate held it up and looked at it the way you look at something you're actually going to keep, not the way you look at something that's going to a storage room in a palace somewhere. And the way you look at something that's going to mean something on a wall. She said, "I'll put this somewhere I'll see it." The speeches were brief. Kate's remarks were not delivered from a podium. She stood, which put her at approximately the same height as half the people in the room and shorter than the other half, and she spoke without notes. Not because she's effortlessly eloquent. I think the idea that Kate operates on effortless eloquence is a misreading of what's actually considerable work. I think she prepares. Look, she thinks. The fact pretty much that it doesn't show is the preparation. She talked about sport as a language. Not metaphorically. She was precise about it. She said that rugby league in particular carries a specific dialect. Yeah, that there are things you can say on a rugby pitch that can't be said in a therapist's office, not because the therapist's office is worse, but because it speaks a different language and not everyone is fluent in it yet. That sport is one of the places where certain conversations, about difficulty, about fear, about asking for help, can happen in a register that feels native rather than foreign. The communities that understand this, she said, are ahead. Not because they've more resources, because in my opinion, they trusted what they already had. She looked at Terry, who was sitting near the back with his hands folded. A look of intense concentration, as if he was trying to memorize this and he was taking the job seriously. "This ground," she said, "has been carrying its community for 150 years. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because people decide over and over again that it's worth caring about." She stopped. "Let it land." "Thank you for letting me be here today," she said. "Not. I'm honored to be here. Not the formal from the balcony version. Thank you for letting me." The cars came at 1:30. Plus, the departure had a different quality to the arrival. Softer somehow, though I'm not sure softer is quite right. More pretty much complete, the way a song ends rather than stops. There was less formal arrangement, which people clustered near the exit, not in a line, just in the natural accumulation of a group that's quite ready to disperse. Kate moved through it slowly. She stopped at Priya. Who was standing near the edge of the group with her hands in her jacket pockets and the expression of someone deciding whether to say something. She said something. Kate leaned in slightly. Not in the performative "I'm leaning in to hear you" way, just the natural adjustment of someone in a noisy room. And listened, nodded, replied. Priya looked at her feet, then back up. "Okay," she said. Plus, actually, I don't know what was said. I'm making peace with not knowing. Plus, Terry was the last person. He was standing beside the gate with his corner flag. He'd been carrying it all morning, I don't know. Why, I think he'd simply stopped registering it. And Kate paused on her way out and looked at him. "Same time next week?" she said, and he laughed. A full laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere low and genuine. "Nah, I'll have the kettle on," he said. She walked through the gate, and the cars pulled away. Afterward, the ground settled back into itself, which players drifted toward the car park. Coaches returned to training schedules. The function room's round tables were slowly rearranged by 2 volunteers who'd been waiting to clear up since the food went out. The Yorkshire pudding plates were empty. I stood on the pitch for a few extra minutes. The grass was still marked with boot prints from the morning's session, patterns of movement that would fade with rain and time and the ordinary work of the ground. The corner flag at the near end was slightly crooked from where it had been replaced at speed. The far stands were empty and waiting. Donna came and stood beside me. She'd been on her phone. There were calls to return, emails to answer, in the practical machinery of a day that had just changed in the ways days sometimes do. "Will anything actually change?" I asked. It was a reporter's question, possibly the wrong one for the moment. She didn't answer immediately. "Something already changed," she said finally. "Ryan, the boy who talked about his dad. He asked me after lunch about the one-to-one sessions. He's been here 8 months and he's never asked." She paused. "He'll probably tell himself he'd have asked anyway. Maybe he would have." She shrugged. Plus, actually, the shrug of someone who has learned to take the small things without needing to verify them. "But he asked today." Fun fact, I drove back on the M1 in the particular meditative blankness of a motorway in November, the fields gray-green on either side. Is the sky doing what Yorkshire skies do, threatening rain without committing to it, keeping everything in a kind of suspended readiness? I kept thinking about what Marcus had said. Make the cage optional. I kept thinking about Terry with his corner flag. About Ryan's single nod, which about Priya deciding not to be scared of things. About the framed jersey on a wall somewhere, and a woman who said she'd put it where she'd see it, and the small weight of believing that. There's a version of this story where it's about access, about a royal visiting a rugby club and the machinery of soft power and institutional symbolism. That version isn't wrong exactly. Look, it's just incomplete. The version I kept noticing was smaller. It was Donna pressing her fingers to her mouth. It was a boy asking a question he'd been not asking for 8 months. It was Terry, still holding that flag, laughing in a car park. It was a 15-year-old girl who ran onto a pitch once, found out she wasn't scared, and decided to find out what else she wasn't scared of. That's what unity looks like when it isn't a word in a speech. It looks like people deciding, in proximity to each other, that the thing is worth doing. Again, and again, and again, until it's in the walls, until it doesn't need a poster, which end of part 3. This story is a narrative reconstruction based on the documented visit of the Princess of Wales to Wakefield Trinity Rugby Club. Composite characters and details are drawn from accounts of similar community visits and reflect the documented ethos of the princess's foundation work in sport and mental health.